a 7-year-old child, a hospital room, and a question no one expected. When Steph Curry's son asked why God wasn't healing his mentor immediately, no one imagined his answer would change thousands of lives. What Canon said that day left even his father, a basketball star, completely speechless. The California sun shone through the windows of Oakland Children's Hospital that Thursday afternoon. In the fourth-floor corridor, Steph Curry walked with tense steps, his normally relaxed shoulders now bearing the weight of concern. At his side, his 7-year-old son, Canon Jack Curry, firmly held his hand, his curious eyes observing everything around him. "Dad, will Mr. Wilson be okay?" asked Canon, his small voice seeming even smaller in the hospital environment. Steph took a deep breath. How to explain to a 7-year-old boy that David Wilson, the man who had been Steph's mentor since his early days in the NBA and practically an uncle to his children, was fighting an aggressive cancer that had appeared suddenly, leaving everyone on high alert? "We're praying for that, champ," replied Steph, using his son's affectionate nickname. "The doctors are doing everything they can." Behind them, Aisha Curry walked with daughters Riley and Ryan, 12 and 9 years old respectively. The Curry family had always been close to the Wilsons, and David had been the first to believe in Steph's potential when many doubted that a shooter of his stature could succeed in the NBA. Upon entering room 418, they found David sitting on the hospital bed. Even with tubes and monitors around him, he maintained that dignity that had always characterized him. As a father figure to many young players, David had always been a pillar of faith and strength for the community. "My champions," he said, with a weak smile upon seeing the children enter. The girls approached cautiously, Canon being the last, his wide eyes fixed on the medical equipment. "Hi, Mr. Wilson," he finally said. "I brought something for you." Canon took a small folded drawing from his pocket. A simple basketball illustration with the message, "Stay strong," written in colorful letters. David's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful, my angel. Thank you." For an hour they talked, trying to keep the mood light despite the seriousness of the situation. Martha, David's wife, had briefly left to get coffee for everyone, leaving them in the room. That's when Dr. Martinez entered to check David's vital signs and adjust his medication. He explained in simple terms that the results of the latest tests didn't show the expected improvement. "We'll try a new treatment protocol," said the doctor. "We need to be patient." After the doctor left, a heavy silence fell over the room. The constant beeping of the monitors seemed louder now. It was Canon who broke the silence with the question no one expected. "Dad," he said, his voice clear in the quiet room, "if God can do anything, why doesn't he heal Mr. Wilson right now?" The room got even quieter. Steph opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. As a Golden State Warriors star, he was used to answering difficult questions in post-game interviews, but this simple question from his son left him speechless. "Well," Steph began, but Canon continued, his eyes shining with a wisdom that seemed beyond his years. "Pastor Mike said that sometimes God uses difficult things to teach us. Maybe God is trying to teach us something very important through Mr. Wilson. And maybe Mr. Wilson is so special that God chose him for this lesson." David gasped softly. Isha covered her mouth with her hand. Riley and Ryan looked at their younger brother with astonishment. "What do you think God is trying to teach us, Canon?" asked David, his voice hoarse with emotion. Canon thought for a moment, frowning in concentration. Then his face lit up. "I think he's reminding us that we need each other. When you're sick, Mr. Wilson, We all get a day, little sick in here. He pointed to his heart. But we also get stronger together. Like when Daddy and the team play better when they pass the ball to each other. What Canon didn't know was that a patient in the next room was recording a video for her own family at that exact moment, and through the half-open door captured the conversation. Impressed by the depth of the boy's words, she continued recording discreetly. Steph finally found his voice. "Canon, that's very wise, son." His words came out choked with emotion. "And you know what else, Daddy?" continued Canon, now sitting on the edge of David's bed, swinging his legs. "I think God is also telling us that we need to be grateful for the time we have together. Like when you always say thanks after games, even when you lose." At this moment, Martha returned to the room with the coffee, immediately realizing that she had missed something important. "What happened?" "Your young friend here just gave us a sermon worthy of the best preacher," said David with tears in his eyes, but a smile on his face. Later that night, as he drove his family back home, Steph remained silent, processing his son's words. As a man who frequently spoke openly about his Christian faith, including his famous chest taps and pointing to the sky after good plays, he was proud of the spiritual foundation that he and Isha were building for their children. But today, he felt humbled by Canon's innocent wisdom. What he didn't know was that at that exact moment, the video capturing Canon's words was already being shared in private message groups, about to find its way to social media and trigger a wave of reactions that the Curry family wasn't prepared to face. The first sign that something had changed came the next morning, when Steph's phone wouldn't stop vibrating during breakfast. Messages from teammates, friends, and even coach Steve Kerr, all sharing the same link. "What's going on?" asked Aisha, noticing her husband's perplexed expression as he scrolled through his smartphone screen. Steph turned the phone to show her. On the screen, a video with more than 1 million views titled, "Steph Curry's son shares divine wisdom in hospital. Moving." "Oh my God," whispered Aisha, taking the phone. In the video, clearly recorded without their knowledge, Canon could be seen talking about God using David Wilson's illness to teach about unity and gratitude. "How did this get on the internet?" asked Riley, peeking over her mother's shoulder. "Someone must have recorded it at the hospital," replied Steph, running his hand over his face. As a public figure, he was used to the lack of privacy, but this was different. This involved his son, his private words, an intimate moment during a crisis affecting someone close to them. Before they could fully process what was happening, Steph's phone rang. It was Bob Myers, general manager of the Warriors. "Steph, have you seen the video?" asked Bob without preamble. "We just saw it." "Bob, we have no idea how it leaked." "Well, it's everywhere. ESPN, TNT Sports, all the sports news channels are talking about it. And not just sports media. Religious channels, morning shows. Everyone wants to know more." Steph closed his eyes for a moment. What are they saying? For the most part, positive things. People are touched. But you know the media. Some are questioning if it was staged. Others are analyzing every word Canon said as if he were a theologian. And there's a handful criticizing you for showing off the boy's faith. After hanging up, Steph sat at the kitchen table with Aisha. Canon was in the living room watching cartoons, oblivious to the hurricane of attention his sincere words had triggered. "What are we going to do?" asked Aisha, concern evident on her face. "First, we need to protect Canon. He's just a child. Then, we need to figure out how to deal with this publicly." That afternoon, when dropping Canon off at school, Steph realized that the situation was even more serious than he had imagined. Parents and even teachers approached, wanting to talk about the video, praising Canon's spiritual maturity. In the classroom, Canon quickly realized that something had changed when his classmates began asking questions about the video. "Is it true that you talked to God in the hospital?" asked one classmate. "My dad said you're an angel," said another. Confused and a little scared by the sudden attention, Canon withdrew. When Steph picked him up at the end of the day, he found a much quieter boy than usual. "Everyone's talking about what I said to Mr. Wilson," Canon said softly in the car. "But I was just saying what I felt in my heart, Daddy." Steph's heart tightened. "I know, champ. You didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you said something so beautiful and true that it touched many people. But I didn't want everyone to hear. It was just for Mr. Wilson and our family." At training that day, reporters surrounded Steph as soon as he stepped onto the court. Questions came from all directions. "Curry, what did you feel when you heard your son's words? Do you instruct Canon about religion? Or is this wisdom natural? How is Mr. Wilson now? Do you believe your son has a special spiritual gift?" Steph, normally calm and articulate with the press, felt overwhelmed. That's when Draymond Green, his teammate for years, intervened. "Okay, folks, that's enough," said Green, placing himself between Steph and the reporters. "This is a personal matter. Let's respect that and focus on basketball today." Later, in the locker room, Jaron Collins, one of the assistant coaches, sought out Steph. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" In a quiet corner, Collins shared his own experience. "My twin brother Jason went through something similar when he came out publicly. Suddenly, a very personal aspect of his life became a topic of public discussion. What helped was establishing clear boundaries and remembering that, in the end, your story belongs to you." Collins's words resonated with Steph. That night, after putting the children to bed, he and Isha made a difficult decision. They would take a break from social media and limit the family's public appearances for some time. "We're not running away," Steph explained to Isha as she turned off her Instagram notifications. "We're just creating space to process this as a family first." What they didn't know was that their absence from social media would only fuel more speculation, and Canon's simple words would continue echoing far beyond the basketball courts, reaching hearts and minds in ways no one could have predicted. 3 days passed since the video went viral. In the Curry home in Atherton, California, the silence of the early morning hours was interrupted when Steph found Isha in the kitchen, preparing coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, noticing the dark circles under his wife's eyes. Isha shook her head. "I was reading emails until late. Steph, you need to see some of the messages we're receiving." She opened her tablet and showed him a special folder she had created. Hundreds of emails from people across the country. Parents whose children were sick, elderly people in hospitals, families going through crises, pastors, teachers, all sharing how Canon's words had deeply touched them. "This one," said Isha, selecting an email, "is from a mother in Chicago whose son has leukemia. She says she showed the video to him and, for the first time in months, saw him smile and talk about hope." Steph felt a lump in his throat as he read more messages. One after another told stories of how Canon's simple observation about God using difficulties to teach about unity and gratitude had arrived at just the right moment for many people in suffering. "It's amazing," murmured Steph, "and scary at the same time. Canon is only 7 years old. He didn't ask for this responsibility." "But what if—" Isha hesitated, carefully choosing her words. What if this is bigger than us? What if God really is using Canon in some way? The conversation was interrupted when they heard small footsteps coming down the stairs. Canon appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Good morning, champ," Steph smiled, quickly closing the tablet. "Did you sleep well?" Canon nodded, climbing onto a stool to reach the table. "I dreamed about Mr. Wilson. He was smiling and didn't have tubes anymore." Steph and Isha exchanged glances. That morning, they had planned to have a difficult conversation with Canon about the whole situation, but now they realized they needed to first better understand what was going on in their son's mind. "Canon," Isha began gently, placing a bowl of cereal in front of him, "you know that many people saw the video of what you said in the hospital to Mr. Wilson, right?" Canon nodded again, focused on his cereal. "The friends at school said I'm famous now." "And how do you feel about that?" asked Steph. Canon thought for a moment, his expression serious beyond his years. "A little strange. I was just saying what I learned in Sunday school and what I felt in my heart. It's nothing special." "It is special, son," said Aisha. "Your sincerity touched many people. But we want to make sure you're okay with all this." Canon put down his spoon and looked directly at his parents. "I'm okay if Mr. Wilson is okay. That's all that matters." That afternoon, Steph and Aisha took Canon to visit Pastor Mike at the Baptist church, where the family regularly attended. Pastor Mike had been a spiritual counselor to the Currys for years and had known Canon since he was a baby. In the cozy church office, with walls lined with books, Pastor Mike listened attentively as the family explained the situation. Canon, sitting between his parents on the couch, occasionally added details to the story. "Canon," said Pastor Mike, leaning forward in his chair, "do you remember that story I told about Joseph in Egypt? How something that seemed bad ended up being used by God for a greater good?" Canon nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, his brothers sold him, but then he saved everyone from famine." "Exactly. Sometimes God works that way. What you said in the hospital was simply truth, spoken with love and innocence. And God is using your words to comfort people you don't even know. Like Joseph helped people he didn't know?" "Precisely," smiled Pastor Mike, before turning to Steph and Aisha. "Children often have a spiritual understanding that surprises adults. Jesus even talked about this in the Gospels. It's not that they have more theological knowledge, but their faith hasn't yet been complicated by doubts, cynicism, or personal agenda." As they were driving home, Steph's phone rang. It was Martha Wilson, David's wife. His heart raced as he answered, fearing bad news. "Steph, it's Martha. I wanted you to know before you heard from someone else." Steph held his breath. "The BT, doctors are surprised. The latest tests show a significant reduction in the tumor. The new treatment seems to be working better than expected. David is still not out of danger, but the doctors are really optimistic now." Relief washed over Steph like a wave. That's wonderful, Martha. Thank you for letting us know." When he hung up, Aisha looked at him anxiously from the passenger seat. "Mr. Wilson?" "He's getting better," said Steph, his voice breaking. In the rearview mirror, he saw Canon's face light up. "See, Daddy? God is answering our prayers." That night, after the children went to bed, Steph found a pile of letters on the desk in his office that Aisha had set aside. Among them, one from Craig Mitchell, a respected journalist from the San Francisco Chronicle, known for his integrity and depth in his reporting. The letter was respectful and direct. Mitchell requested an exclusive interview with the family, not to exploit sensationalism, but to present the full context behind Canon's words and explore the impact they were having on the community. "I think we should consider it," said Isha when Steph showed her the letter. "If someone is going to tell this story, better that it be someone we trust and who respects our boundaries." Steph hesitated. "What if it just brings more attention? Canon is so young." "Maybe this is the way to protect him, taking control of the narrative before others distort it even more." After a long conversation, they decided to call Mitchell the next day. It wasn't an easy decision, but they were beginning to understand that maybe this story needed to be told. Not for them, but for the countless people who were finding hope in the simple words of a 7-year-old boy. The improvised studio in the Currys' living room was prepared with soft lighting and just 2 discreet cameras. Craig Mitchell had kept his promise to keep the interview intimate and respectful, bringing only a small camera operator and a sound technician. "We're ready when you are," said Mitchell gently, adjusting his glasses while checking his notes. The Curry family was seated on the sectional sofa that was normally the stage for movie nights and board games. Steph and Isha in the middle, with Canon between them and Riley and Ryan on the sides. David Wilson, still visibly fragile, but with a renewed gleam in his eyes, had been released from the hospital for a brief visit and was sitting in a nearby armchair, with Martha at his side. "Before we begin," said Steph, "we want to make it clear that any question directed at Canon can be ignored if he doesn't feel comfortable answering." Mitchell nodded respectfully. "Absolutely. This is, above all, a conversation, not an interrogation." When the cameras started rolling, Mitchell began with gentle questions about family routine and the faith that had always been an integral part of the Currys' life. Steph talked about how his own parents had established a strong spiritual foundation and how he and Isha worked to do the same with their children. "We always encourage open questions about faith," explained Isha. "We want our children to develop a personal relationship with God, not just follow rules or traditions without understanding them." Eventually, the conversation reached the moment in the hospital that had captured the attention of millions. "Canon," said Mitchell gently, "many people were touched by what you said about God using difficult moments to teach us. Can you remember what you were feeling at that moment?" Canon looked at Mr. Wilson before responding. "I was sad that Mr. Wilson was sick, but I also remembered that Pastor Mike said, 'God never wastes a pain.' So I thought there must be a reason, even if it was hard to understand." "And what do you think was the reason?" asked Mitchell. "To remind us to love each other while we can," answered Canon without hesitation. "Like when Daddy always hugs us tight before traveling for games, because he knows he'll miss us." The simplicity and depth of the response left the journalist visibly moved. Mitchell looked at his notes, trying to regain his composure. "There was a moment before this," intervened David Wilson, his voice still weak but determined. "About a month ago, that I think is important to share." The camera turned to him as he told how he had taken Canon to watch a Warriors practice, and during a break, Canon had asked why some people suffered more than others. At the time, David had offered some words about the mystery of God's ways, but never imagined that Canon would process that conversation in the way he demonstrated at the hospital. "I always knew Canon had a special sensitivity," continued David, "but in that moment at the hospital, I felt as if God was speaking directly through him, as if it was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment of despair." The interview continued exploring the unexpected impact that Canon's words had had. Steph shared some of the moving messages the family had received, including one from a rival NBA player who was struggling with silent depression after a serious injury. "He told me that Canon's words reminded him that his value isn't just in his ability to play basketball, but in how he can use this difficult moment to strengthen connections with his family and rediscover his faith. The camera caught Canon smiling shyly, clearly surprised that his words could mean so much to a professional athlete he admired. What impressed us most, added Aisha, was how so many people from different religions and backgrounds found comfort in the message. It wasn't just about Christianity, but about the universal idea of finding purpose amid suffering and valuing our human connections. When Mitchell asked about future plans, Steph revealed something that the family had kept secret until that moment. Inspired by the unexpected impact of Canon's words, we decided to create the Echoes of Hope initiative. It's a project to bring emotional and spiritual support to children in hospitals and their families. Not to impose our beliefs, clarified Aisha quickly, but to create spaces where children can express their own questions and thoughts about what they're facing. Near the end of the interview, Mitchell addressed Canon directly once more. Canon, many people are calling you wise beyond your years. What do you think about that? Canon reflected for a moment, his legs swinging without reaching the floor. I don't think I'm wise. I think sometimes adults are so busy thinking about complicated things that they forget the simple things that are important. The response drew smiles from everyone present. And what simple things do you think are the most important? Asked Mitchell. Loving people, being grateful, and remembering that God is with us even when we're sad or scared. When the cameras were turned off and the team began dismantling the equipment, there was a tangible feeling that something significant had occurred in that room. It wasn't just an interview, but a testimony of how faith, expressed in the simple language of a child, could transcend barriers and touch hearts. The following week, the interview aired in prime time and quickly became the most shared segment on social media. Hospitals began contacting the Curry Foundation, interested in partnerships with the Echoes of Hope initiative. Churches, synagogues, and mosques used the story in sermons about childlike wisdom and genuine faith. 1 month later, David Wilson received even better news from the doctors. The tumor had decreased significantly, and his prognosis had changed from terminal to treatable. Recovery would still be long, but now there was real hope. On a Sunday afternoon, the Curry family and the Wilsons gathered for a celebration lunch in the Curry's backyard. The children played in the pool while the adults talked in the shade. You know, said David to Steph as they watched Canon dive into the water. When I was diagnosed, the first thing I thought was, why me? I spent my life trying to help others, being a person of faith. It seemed unfair. Steph nodded, understanding the feeling perfectly. But now, continued David, I see the impact all this has had. The thousands of people who found comfort through Canon's words. The initiative you've started, which is already helping so many families. I won't say I'm happy I had cancer, but I'm at peace with the purpose that emerged from it. Later that night, as he tucked Canon into bed, Steph sat on the edge and looked at his son with a mixture of pride and admiration. You know, Canon, your father is considered a good shooter, but I think you have an even more special gift. What, Daddy? Asked Canon, already sleepy. The gift of seeing with your heart, of seeing beyond what's on the surface. That's something that can't be taught or trained. Canon smiled, his eyes beginning to close. It's because sometimes we need to close our eyes to see better with our heart, like when we pray. Steph stayed there for a long time after Canon fell asleep, reflecting on how a simple question in a hospital room had transformed into a movement of hope that was now touching countless lives. Outside, the California sky was dotted with stars. Steph remembered a biblical passage that his own father frequently quoted. "Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings, you have established strength." Never had those words seemed so true as now. In a world often consumed by cynicism and division, the simple words of a child about faith, family, and finding purpose in suffering had become a powerful echo, reminding everyone of truths that, perhaps, they always knew, but had forgotten amid the noise of modern life. And that echo would continue to spread, touching life after life, heart after heart, all beginning with a sincere question from a 7-year-old boy who simply expressed what he felt in his heart about God, suffering, and the transformative power of love.